After Sonic ended up inside the Backrooms and fought and faced an entity that looked like him, now it's Shadow's turn to find his own version of the Backrooms. And also Knuckles himself, in a very brutal form, showing that this story is continuing and getting even creepier. It was created here by Agnes, and I'm going to tell you everything that's in it and what might happen in the future. I'm sharing the whole story in one video, so if you've seen my earlier videos, check the on-screen timestamp. But if you're just stumbling in here out of nowhere, don't worry, the whole story will be in just one video. So say hi, and let's get to the story. The comic starts with Sonic simply trying to find a way out of a very strange place, known here as the Backrooms. A place famous for having lots of yellowish hallways with worn-out floors, and that basically has endless paths like a huge maze that never leads anywhere. These hallways are really unsettling and went viral on the internet because of a short viral story. These hallways here seem to never lead anywhere, and it also seems like small creatures might be living there, but in a very suspicious way. The place is deeply unsettling and there is never a clear way out. This place here is a paradox of time and space, so much so that you can't tell which direction or era you're in, since things and objects from the past, present, and even the future can appear at the same time, because time there doesn't work the way we know it. Objects appear here being remembered and forgotten all the time. For example, they might seem familiar or they might seem more unsettling. Backrooms is like this. An environment with endless corridors and rooms, yellow wallpaper, strange carpet, and a buzzing sound that comes from all these lights scattered throughout this place. How Sonic ended up there is still a mystery, but the story begins at this point in the story. He's trapped there, but he doesn't realize that behind him, a somewhat unfamiliar but taller creature was watching him and following him. It looks like Sonic, but its appearance is a bit strange. Turning around and facing this creature, he becomes completely terrified and breaks out in a cold sweat, staring at that giant creature as if he were nothing, tiny compared to its great stature. Here he has a slightly creepy, duplicated smile, as if it were a distorted reflection. Two little snouts, several different irises, two pairs of ears, and he stares without any kind of fear, as if he were, saying hello, as if he were friendlier. Even so, Sonic doesn't look at him in a friendly way. He gets terrified by the situation and does the only thing he can do: run. Desperate, he shouts that there's no way someone like him can catch up. He needs to shake him off, but the other hedgehog is there, chasing him at the same speed. He keeps running at full speed, but he ends up falling into a hole where his spin dash lets him go down a few more levels, and from there he keeps moving forward, putting a lot of distance between them. Landing in a superhero pose, he thinks everything is fine, looks around, but then he notices something terrible, something scarier than the other Sonic, the pool level. Backrooms is huge, but the further you go, you end up finding different levels. The pool level isn't here, there are several corridors, but the difference is that it has pool-like architecture, those pools that just keep stretching and stretching without you knowing where they end. Sonic faces that and thinks it's a joke, but when he faces it, the other hedgehog ends up getting really close. Not only that, but he copies the same pose, as if the two were the same thing, and he knew exactly how Sonic would act. So Sonic tries to calm the situation and talks to him. He proposes one thing: a race, where if he wins, Sonic will stay with him, trapped. But if he wins, he leaves, and the creature seems to be calmer. He actually responds well to Sonic, and he also listens to him. Unlike other entities that Sonic has faced over all these years, this being shows a big smile and keeps agreeing with him without saying a single word. After all, he is the hedgehog, and he is also Sonic. That way, he also wants to join a race. Looking at him fearfully, he says not to hold him back, getting ready. And when the race starts, the two begin to run. They go really fast over the water and also grab some grids here to keep sliding. Sonic runs at his ultra speed, which allows him to float over the water, but he also grabs some buoys to use as a boost. The big thing here is that Sonic is literally facing another version of himself, but he's a duplicate and a little taller. Those longer legs would be able to outrun him, and while Sonic is running, he feels very uncomfortable. He even wonders if that place is eternal and has no end. So, he changes the bet. He says that whoever finds the exit wins, and the other hedgehog ends up agreeing. What's even scarier is that he only responds with gestures and never speaks again. Sonic keeps running and finds some very familiar signs, showing that place, the break room, has already connected with his world several times. and he wonders why that place keeps getting bigger the more he runs. But for some reason, Sonic started to get really tired. And that doesn't make sense to him, since he's never gotten tired from running so much. But his determination makes him want to keep going, and he keeps going. He says he hasn't felt this bad since the time he was infected by a virus, and that this place needs to have an exit. It has to end. Leaving the water zone, he ends up entering another large room. He stops for a second and stares at what's in front of him, but he can't believe that it's real. There's practically a huge sea of water in front of him, but he's not afraid. He wants to keep going because he needs to keep going to find a way out, and he doesn't want to be trapped in this place anymore. He stretches and gets ready to leave. Powering himself up, he runs at his top speed, creating a huge wave wherever he goes. His speed is so high, that he ends up breaking the sound barrier. He starts to notice several details ahead that suggest there could be a wall or even an exit. He keeps running, passing by each of those pillars and corridors. He is moving at an immensely fast speed, going far beyond what he usually does in aquatic places. Regaining his composure, he moves forward, where he finds a large wall and what appears to be an exit. But when he gets very close to that end, he ends up finding that other hedgehog, realizing that he managed to win and that Sonic would be trapped in this place. So tired, Sonic gives up, falling into the water and drowning. Already unconscious and almost drowned, the other hedgehog falls into the water, preventing Sonic from falling into the darkness, since it seems like this pool has no bottom. There, this other hedgehog ends up arriving. He grabs Sonic and pulls him by his arm, and unlike the original hedgehog, he can swim and ends up pulling Sonic back out of the pool. He feels a little sad about the situation, and Sonic is still unconscious, so he ends up taking Sonic to the big exit, which leads them to floor 37. And they keep running. Unlike other adaptations of Sonic in other universes, this one is the craziest because it picks up some details from the Backrooms, which went viral years ago and even got a movie that caught the attention of a whole new crowd. Sonic by himself should be able to escape from anywhere in the Backrooms, since he's dealt with alternate dimensions and has faced much more powerful creatures. A classic example here is Infinity, who ended up creating his own dimension and throwing out several challenges that go beyond Sonic's abilities. Or when he entered cyberspace to, complete missions inside Sonic Frontiers. These environments were much more familiar to Sonic, so he was able to have some control over everything that was there. The big issue is that Backrooms put him on a floor completely surrounded by pools and water, which makes him completely scared. The panic situation with him dealing with this other form of Sonic, which in a way seemed to want to save him, made him lose some of his energy and go into survival mode. It's the kind of situation that has Sonic facing himself, but he started to get completely tired and terrified because he wasn't sure what was coming. Look, to be honest, it's a much more nerfed version of Sonic, but the person who's creating this comic really liked the feedback it got and has already started working on new adaptations and sequels, because it looks like this series has a future. In fact, on the day I'm recording this video, some new things have already come out. Sonic is saved and taken to a kind of pink house, the cat house, where he remains asleep. The entity basically put Sonic to sleep and was happy with that situation. But while Sonic rests, the entity also ends up falling asleep, waiting for the hedgehog to wake up. Outside, near Grand Hill, Tails is worried because Sonic is untraceable. In other words, he has no idea where the hedgehog is, and Amy is also worried. This situation is so alarming that many other characters ended up showing up here. Knuckles is worried, thinking that Sonic is in danger, and even Silver shows up here, saying that if Sonic can't be tracked here, it seems like he was taken to another reality. But surprisingly, the one who ends up showing up here is Dr. Eggman, saying that he has a clue about where Sonic might have gone and that they should follow him to understand what's going on. And this kind of information is so surprising that even Knuckles can't understand the situation. There's a certain instability in the air here. Both Knuckles and Shadow became much more apprehensive, and Tails is more aggressive, trying to understand why on earth Dr. Eggman would want to help. Eggman makes it very clear that he wants to destroy Sonic and keep him far away, but it's better to have Sonic nearby than for him to just disappear out of nowhere. and that Tails should be grateful because he's going to make the search for Sonic go much faster. Amy tries to calm Tails down, since Eggman has helped Sonic in other situations in the past, and Tails ends up agreeing and feeling a little calmer. After a few minutes of walking, Dr. Eggman says that he knows he found a strange anomaly in this door-shaped symbol on one of the walls of Grand Hill. It seems that Sonic was taken to this place, and his last life sign was detected outside this door. Tails also finds that strange and believes that kind of portal might have drawn Sonic inside. That way, they would have to get ready in order to go through that door. And on top of that, Eggman even adds that after someone goes through that portal, no more life signs are detected, as if it were a kind of wormhole, where whoever enters is practically taken to another moment in another dimension. He goes on to say that if everyone is going after Sonic, everyone needs to be prepared, because that place is an endless maze of yellow walls. And he warns that it's an endless maze of yellow walls and musty carpets. Shadow takes the lead here and says we don't have time to waste and that everyone should get ready to go after that other hedgehog. And of course, Rouge even jokes about the situation, pointing out how, wow, Shadow is really worried about the hedgehog, and he immediately cuts her off, telling her to be quiet. Well, after a few days, Sonic finally wakes up in that pink bed. He feels a little better after sleeping, but he gets startled by that entity just staring at him without any movement or reaction. He's there, kind of nervous to find out that he's trapped with the other creature. And she's really happy, showing a smile and joy because he woke up. But Sonic also shows that he has another problem. He hasn't eaten for several days and needs to eat. So the entity ends up getting up and going to get something for the hedgehog. He makes some signs and gestures here, trying to make himself understood and explain to Sonic that they're going to have dinner, and he starts to smell something nice. In other words, a giant plate of chili dogs, Sonic's favorite food. He's happy and thanks the entity for cooking all of this for him. He eats the chili dogs and loves them, because for him, it's going to be the best food ever. It's like the saying, hunger is the best seasoning. Then, the entity opens its big mouth to eat, showing that it has lots and lots of teeth, even resembling Shin Sonic's mouth, which scares the real Sonic. But the other one, the entity, ends up loving the chili dogs too. And Sonic concludes that it's actually only good because he himself is the hedgehog, despite everything. They spent a week here inside that pink kitty house, and Sonic ends up getting a stylish outfit, a jacket here, which is beautiful. It looks like a high school uniform. And here he meets a strange being who pronounces the numbers 0623. Both Sonic and the entity leave, thanking them for the stay. And of course, they give him a little Sonic plushie. So the two of them set off into the unknown. Outside, Sonic struggles with the glare that hits his face. And he arrives here in a setting full of hills, slopes, and a straight path. But Sonic starts to have a strange feeling, as if something bad is about to happen. But they have no other choice, except to keep moving forward. So they quickly speed up. And after running for a long time, something catches the hedgehog's attention. He stops and stares at the biggest hill of all, with a large castle on top. A very unique house, among all the others around the vast backroom setting. Staring at that makes Sonic start to feel bad. A very strong headache hits him, and even the entity notices that he isn't well. Then, Sonic starts to have a sort of panic attack, where he begins to breathe heavily, as if he were losing his sanity, and his mind was collapsing. He goes into complete despair, wanting to feel normal, but he can't. Then, the entity quickly scoops Sonic up in its arms and starts taking him away. It takes him inside one of those houses, completely moving him away from the final objective, and it starts rummaging through a strange refrigerator. Inside, Sonic ends up resting, wondering what's happening to him. Since he doesn't feel like this, he's not like this. Then, the entity gets him a bottle, which is a kind of almond water. He says that's not ideal for the situation, but it might help. So, he starts drinking it. Meanwhile, the entity kind of unwraps some more food for him. After drinking, Sonic notices that he feels a little better and thanks him. The entity feels a bit calmer because of that, but he ends up handing over that food package he had with him. And he warns that at night they shouldn't go out, because it's dangerous. So, Sonic agrees, saying that's all for today, and he asks exactly what that water is, because for some reason, it was making him feel better and healing him. The entity explains that the more milk, almond water, and things like that he drinks, the better his mind gets. And if he eats and drinks at the same time, he becomes much more aware and sane. It's a way not to go crazy inside this universe. And he explains that if you don't stop to eat and drink, your sanity starts slipping, suggesting that something terrible would happen to Sonic if he kept running outside without stopping. Relaxing, Sonic even ends up telling the entity that it reminds him of another creature, a friend and partner who also helped him in several situations, Tails himself. That makes the entity very happy, but he doesn't know who Tails is, suggesting that this entity, just like Sonic, only exists there with limited information and also with memories of his own body. That explains why he knew how to swim and was able to save the hedgehog. Even so, Sonic still feels a bit bad about that situation, wondering where the others are, how he's going to escape from there, if the others are looking for Sonic inside that world, and of course, what's inside that castle when he finally goes there the next day. That's because outside the house where they are, giant creatures start walking around, waiting for their next victim. The next day, morning comes. The entity started carrying a large amount of almond water in the backpack, and the two set off for the castle that's on the highest of all the hills. When Sonic arrives at that door, he starts to feel a little uneasy again about the situation, as if something bad is about to happen. But he needs to move forward, because that's the goal. Using his homing attack here, he sets out to enter the castle, where that castle has a very different look, even completely changing the art style. That actually reminds me of that animation from Sonic Colors Ultimate. Tell me in the comments whether you think so or not, okay? But anyway, the entity is confused. However, Sonic is a bit more tired than usual. Sonic doesn't exactly like the environment he's in. That castle isn't exactly what he imagined, but he has to move forward in this place, even though it's a bit weird. Again, he starts to feel really bad inside that castle, but he speeds up so he can get through this place quickly. After running through corridor after corridor, Sonic faces something common here. Robots. Strange robots that look like toys from the 60s. These robots here are guards, and they start shooting at Sonic. They try to fire explosive shots that explode around him, but they always end up missing. Both Sonic and the entity manage to dodge, very skillfully, but Sonic starts to counterattack. It's noticeable that the entity also starts attacking the robots after Sonic lands his first blow, and with that, they end up clearing a big path here. But while Sonic is moving forward, heading to the end of the big castle, Sonic's crew gets ready to invade the Backrooms. Tails and his crew joined forces, using Tails' technology and also Robotnik's to find a way to get inside the Backrooms. You can see that Tails is now here with equipment to avoid any kind of radiation or infection inside his body. The two of them built a big portal on top of that symbol, but they end up realizing that inside the Backrooms, the air isn't as toxic as they thought it would be. Some prefer to wear masks, others don't. Robotnik and Tails have the idea to split up. Since the place is so huge, they could find Sonic much faster if they explore different areas. The two of them equipped their outfits with various pieces of technology to make sure everyone could keep track of their location. So here we have Eggman's team, made up of Rouge, Silver, Shadow, and Robotnik himself, with his walker, the Eggwalk. Meanwhile, here we have Tails' team, Amy and Knuckles, searching that place. While Sonic was moving forward inside the big castle, he comes across what seems to be the king, the owner of the castle, who didn't like the hedgehog's attitude very much, which was, let's say, quite insubordinate. Since Sonic was a difficult character, and the king's challenge was practically to bring his worst nightmares to life, that practically became a new entity, a bizarre being, a copy of Tails, that scares not only Sonic, but also asks why Sonic ended up abandoning them. Which wraps up part 2, and my friend, it's really good. While Sonic was practically isolated on different paths, but no one knows exactly where each of them is. They're on a mission to find Sonic, but we don't know how each one survived. But as Sonic goes deeper and deeper into that castle, he faces several challenges until he meets the Great King. The entity doesn't have a clear body, but when he faces that creature, it starts to transform, and it uses some of the hedgehog's own memories precisely to transform into his old friend and questions him. Why did he abandon them throughout this whole story? It's because the leader of the castle is an entity that practically manipulates the mind of each of the members who end up entering that Backrooms universe. At least that's what it seems here. Why do you think Sonic has another entity that ends up helping him? As bizarre as it may be, it's still literally Sonic. A lot of people didn't understand this part, but even though he's quite bizarre and scary, he's still the Sonic we know. That explains why he really liked the idea of running and participating in races. And at the same time, he managed to save Sonic, but he had the ability to swim, which is very strange. Because even though he's that being we understand as a hedgehog, he's not exactly Sonic himself. He's an entity that replicates him, but has some extra abilities. And the prior knowledge of what happens inside the Backrooms itself. Even though it's a completely strange and disconnected place, a lot of people get confused by it, but this man goes way beyond what the writer creating stories around this concept is capable of. So, when the king of the castle appears in front of Sonic just to challenge him, he ends up taking on the image of Tails himself, which, by the way, is already a reference, since the setting really resembles the Tales of Tails doll. Hi, I'm your little friend. Sonic's brave pose simply disappears because Tails shows up here with his eyes closed, or even without eyes. And Sonic wonders, then simply says that he never abandoned anyone, he never wanted to do that. Then that Tails quickly ends up turning into Knuckles. Holding Sonic by his neck, shouting at Sonic that he disappeared for many weeks. That's why, shouting that he's nothing to his friend, that he was a coward and disappeared. Sonic is in shock, saying what the hell is happening to him. This isn't real. They're not Knuckles or Tails. Then Knuckles himself throws a super punch right in Sonic's stomach, leaving him stunned. This blow is almost fatal, making him spit out ketchup. And then he hammers Sonic's face into the ground, showing that Knuckles is here and ready to put an end to this. Sonic is completely in shock, because that kind of situation wasn't supposed to happen. He's using the image of Sonic's own friends to make him uncomfortable with the situation. And they're trapped in their own thoughts, hitting the ground with their hearts almost racing in a very bizarre way. He tells himself that he's better than that he's trying to control you, but he can't let it happen. This king is a coward because he can't use Sonic as his puppet. So when the king tells him to give up everything, Sonic slowly gets up and starts laughing, saying that the king himself asked for everything that's happening and what's yet to come. You used my friends against me. You tried to use that, and you thought it would be cool. You thought you could control me and steal my freedom. And you think you can do all that and get away with it. You're not a king, you're not a god. And with a powerful aura around him, Sonic channels his energy and makes it very clear the king has no power over him. Let me out now, before I kill you. And before Sonic could release a wave of purple energy from his hands, the king says that Sonic has managed to pass the king's challenge. And now he can pass through the castle. Congratulations, Sonic. Because of that, the entity stays quiet. But Sonic returns to normal, responding, "Good thing, let's get out of here." Entering another portal. Recognizing the place, which is completely different from where they entered. The floor is a bit more reddish, but there's something that catches their attention. Sonic is more confused, and the entity is a little surprised. This is the end of the story for now. After Sonic becomes Dark Sonic to defeat the king, he passes the test and moves on to a new sequence. But Sonic's group ended up entering through a portal. Inside the Backrooms, they split up. Eggman's team went one way, Sonic's the other. Each encountered their own versions and entities, such as Knuckles, who became a more brutal entity named Nickels.
Acabou virando aqui uma entidade pouco mais brutal, grotesca.
He attacks with his fists and has sharp teeth. This deformed clone ends up scaring and startling Nickels really badly, and the only thing he can do in response is try to dodge his own attacks, since they come out of his mouth and his fists, which have turned into wrecking balls shaped like arms. Fortunately, this is pretty easy to handle, so that Tails can neutralize him, giving him a small shock and paralyzing him, making the path safe for everyone. What nobody talks about is why Nickels, from the other reality of the Backrooms, is so aggressive. Since Sonic is much friendlier, it's always good to remember that inside the Backrooms, any entity that goes in there or shows up is actually a reflection of you, but inside this world of the Backrooms. And it's explained that when Sonic ended up finding that identity of his, and the entity is a bit more bizarre, it liked the idea of a race and ended up saving Sonic. It's exactly Sonic, but with some changes. For example, that explains the fact that it can swim and save Sonic, since Sonic can't swim. These entities from the Backrooms are basically those entities that, well, are a kind of reflection that go a bit beyond the concepts we know about these characters. If the guy is really good, he'll be extremely kind. If the guy is bad, he'll be taken to the extreme here, and that's how it is. It takes some aspect of their personality and ends up exaggerating it in a somewhat bizarre way. That explains, for example, Nichols, since he's the guardian of the Master Emerald and actually had the mission to protect it. It's as if they're dealing with Nichols, who's trying to protect the Backrooms and prevent any intruder from wandering around there. That's exactly the basic function that Nichols has. That's his purpose. And that was completely exaggerated here, since he started fighting everyone. If you look closely, he attacks first and asks questions later. Actually, this more aggressive side of Nichols is something we know from his personality and his story, but as time went by, it was completely set aside. Maybe because the Backrooms itself must have some secrets that can't be discovered, and having Nichols there is meant to protect all of that. Now his fists are turning into wrecking balls, destroying with a lot of force. It's a reflection of Nichols himself, who has always been a very strong persona and also aggressive in most of the stories in the games. He has the strength, he has the power, but he barely used that over the years. But we know that's inherent, connected to Nichols himself. But there's still the Shadow side here. They come face to face here with a slightly weirder version of Shadow himself. He has sharp claws and some eyes that are a bit stranger, since they're not just on his skull, but also on his hair and his chest. And he ends up being trapped here, because he ends up scaring and making things a bit tense. Shadow himself used his Chaos Spears to neutralize this version, the Backroom Shadow that was here, and one of the things people didn't notice is that he's a reference to Black Doom. The way the eyes are spread out really reminds me of the leader of the Black Arms, Black Doom. Since his eyes are much less strange here, plus, his claws are basically Black Doom's powers that we know from the story of Shadow Generations, since Shadow in that game, he managed to control those powers a bit more, influenced by Black Doom. But here, it's really exaggerated in his fists, like claws and double claws. Now, meanwhile, Sonic was going through several corridors here, facing various creatures. The one I recognized is that Nemesis head, which is the Scanty Tiller. By the name, he sounds like someone who steals bodies. I can't explain the other two. One creature is part dog, part mermaid. If you know their names or what they do, let me know. Because even the creator just went right past them. And since Sonic was completely exhausted, since he would have used up a lot of energy, the only thing he could do was run and escape from them. So he does it in Sonic style with a boost. And they end up arriving here on another floor, going through another door into a very strange room. Sonic is completely exhausted. The entity seems to be fine. The problem is that they arrive at a party place, better known as the fun level, or the fun level, which is not fun at all. The comic ends here, but after doing some research, I found this footage here, which is the live level fun, which is basically what it's based on. This next chapter of Sonic Backgrounds features linear settings, you know, where you'll walk through somewhat festive environments, birthday party elements, toys, fun things, cheerful things, which would make perfect sense for this type of environment, which is a bit unsettling, because we know these spaces are a bit creepy, and they're practically deafening, and since it's a whole party environment, you can tell that you feel very watched inside this place. So much so that it's known for having one of those creatures here, kind of smiling in yellow. And I imagine there are pettygoers here. I'm really curious to see how they'll be adapted, or if they won't be adapted, in Sonic Backgrounds. They're very friendly creatures that lure their victims over there in the middle of a party. And this kind of festive setting can have a lot of potential. Man, to adapt it into the Sonic universe. Like I said, the creator here is taking a little longer to release these new comics. There was a lot of hype around her, and now the hype is starting to fade. I tell people not to bother her like they did with other creators, like the creator of Digital Circus. Otherwise, she might end up quitting the project. But this is one of the best fan comics I've ever seen here. I'll leave the link in the description so you can follow it directly on her profile. Alright? Thank you very much. Thanks, I'm out. See you in the next video.